again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Daniel. Today we got a very good show for you guys. We have a special guest, Andrew Garrett from Garrett Discovery, CEO from Garrett Discoveries. Andrew, welcome to the show. I'm glad you could be here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. It's my pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And, we got to talking a little bit before the show started. And again, I just want to thank you for joining us and thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule. It sounds like what you do, where you're at, you work with a lot of cases. But for those that don't know, can you explain who you are and what it is that Garrett Discovery does?
Sure. Appreciate it. So I'm CEO of Garrett Discovery. We are a digital forensic expert witness firm. So our job is to analyze evidence and bring truth to light. So that means we don't pick sides. We work for both sides. We work for the prosecutors. We've worked for the defense. We do a lot more defense work than prosecution work. To be fair, that's because law enforcement has their own laboratories and their own people, right? So they typically only go outside those swim lanes when they need a little extra help or they don't have the technical capabilities to work on the case. So we do work all over the world. I flew to numerous countries last year, visiting Americans locked up abroad, interviewing them, conducting digital forensic examinations. So we examine planes, trains, cars, cell phones, computers, IoT devices, anything that has a chipset in it and a board, we analyze. And then we also do stuff like social media discovery and things like that, all things digital. Plus, I got a very large team. So I got a team that has cellular engineers on staff. One of my cell engineers came from the Intel community that helped track down terrorists. I have one that came from Vodafone. I have a doctor. I have nurses. I have computer experts, cell phone experts, social media experts. These people are specialized in what they do. So our job is simply just analyze evidence, write reports, and go to court and testify.
Sounds good. I mean, it sounds like you put yourself around a lot of the right experts and things of that nature. And I try to do the same in my life and aspect as well. I have folks that help me out so much with this channel, and I couldn't do it without them. So I want to thank the mods and everybody that's here. You mentioned terrorism, and before the show started, you mentioned that you guys helped out with the capture or the discovery or location of bin Laden. How did that go down?
The Garrett Discovery didn't, but one of my experts did. So he worked for the Intel community. He designed the technology that found bin Laden. He's a cell engineer. He's got 15 patents in his name. He's currently over in Poland right now for the next couple of weeks, working on developing sub-meter positioning systems, that is to locate cell phones in a sub-meter way. So in other words, down to like 2 square feet.
Wow.
So that's what he's doing right now.
Wow. That's impressive. In a case like this, where there's a lot of questions about locations and direction of travel and things of that nature, it seems like you would have been the guy to call. In fact, that seems to have been the case, right? You got a call from Bryan Kohberger's defense team. Is that accurate?
We did. We got a call from the defense team. At the time, we were super busy. We had lots of other cases on deck. And you got to realize when a case is first started, it's not like the sexiest thing. And everybody, a lot of forensic experts, if they're in a small shop, sometimes they would jump right in, right? They'd say, let's go, because they want the headlines and they want to get out there. I have a portfolio of cases open right now that give you headlines. I got Rudy Giuliani's case. I had a case for Gerard Butler recently, the movie star. We had Jared Fogel's case. I have Maxwell Anderson, the guy accused right now of killing and chopping up a girl up in Wisconsin. And we work for the Judicial Qualifications Commission, the Attorney Review Disciplinary Commission. So our portfolio is very large. So we see a lot of really, really high profile cases. We're on TV a lot. We sit for interviews all the time. So to us, it doesn't seem sexy, right? You know, to me, it's just another day in the office when you have cases involving cartel and 30 migrants in a boat and 400 kilos of cocaine. That's a 9 a.m. 5-minute phone call. You know, when you're talking terrorism and stuff like that, like the other day, I got the military that tried to assign me a case from one of the 9/11 terrorists and asked me if I would take case assignment to work on that case. The answer is no. I don't need the CIA in my business anymore already. I've had them in my business enough. We worked on, for instance, we worked on Cheryl Atkinson's case. That's the reporter that broke Fast and Furious in Benghazi. In her case, the CIA was spying on her equipment, and we had to do the discovery on that. So you can only imagine when it's us on one side of the room and the CIA or FBI and intel agencies on the other side of the room, and we have to testify sometimes opposite of what they're saying. That comes with a lot of scrutiny. So we work on a lot of high profile cases, but they did call me. We were busy at the time. I don't think I gave them enough attention in the very beginning for the first couple days. And we moved on. Plus, they were also not in the position yet in the case to hire somebody. They really didn't have all the facts in the case. It was pretty new. But since then, I really didn't pay attention to the case a lot because, we got 429 open cases right now. We're working a lot. So soon thereafter, probably a couple months, somebody had asked me something about the case, and I said, well, when we first got called in the case, I ran some reports out in a system we have called Shadow Dragon. Was able to pull some social media data to show their relationships, and then I had also had a call from Inside Edition to clean up the audio because we got an audio video forensic lab too, and to clean up that audio to make it sound better and to clean up the video, and the mac and cheese truck video is what they called it. So we worked on that for Inside Edition as well.
Oh, good deal. I wasn't aware of that. And so they contacted you. What was their reasoning behind contacting you guys? What did they tell you? They were looking for a specific answer or a specialty from you guys that they were looking into?
Yeah, cell phone. They had cell phone location data, to call it, and they were looking at that data. And my response to them was, and I saw what had been posted online with the government's report, and mine was, that's nonsense. Like what they were saying just did not make any sense whatsoever. And it's just not that. It's just the methodologies and the principles that are being used were completely incorrect and very misleading to the court and very misleading to any jury or anybody that's even reading the report that's ever had any engineering training whatsoever. I'll be glad to show you, why none of that stuff makes any sense.
Okay. And this is from the state side, right? Well, this is what you looked at first. All right, what the state is saying is nonsense.
Correct. The principles that they apply, and this happens in all these cases involving cell evidence. You got to realize there's most officers. Well, there's the FBI Cellular Analysis Survey team. They've been to actual real engineering training, and we'll talk about that later. But everybody else in the United States goes to a 2-day school to become an expert in cell evidence. This is engineering stuff that they're talking about, and they have 2 days. I have some background in GPS. I was vice president of GPS core technologies before I did all this, that built the first application to track mobile phones. And that's from the phone side software. And then I worked at Naval Research Lab at NASA in geospatial intelligence. I went to training China, London on drive testing, engineering training. And I went to the same exact school the FBI CAST goes to at Florida Institute of Technology with the same professors. I actually hired those professors to teach our people the exact training they teach the FBI slide by slide, and went through the entire program because we wanted to understand what they knew and why we were seeing what we were seeing in court, which was incorrect. And we knew it to be incorrect. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't the base, like their educators, in other words, these professors were teaching them something incorrect. They weren't. They were teaching them the right way, but what they were using in court was horribly incorrect.
Got you. And when you say incorrect, does that mean inaccurate?
Yeah, absolutely, just fictitious, made up.
Made
And I can give you I can give you a good example if you want to see one here.
Yeah.
Let me
Let's see
draw
that.
for you. I'll be
right.
educator today. How about that? I brought a
All right,
marker board. How about
Let's
this?
do that.
So you see a cell tower, right? We
Uh-huh.
know that you have a cell phone, and we know that you have a cell tower that it took a phone call on. This cell tower has a latitude and longitude, right? We know the physical location of it. What you see the government do is they build these nice little things called wedges, and they say that's called a sector. A sector is not cell phone coverage. That is not anything to do with cell phone coverage. Here's what real cell phone coverage looks like if I was to draw a single antenna.
Huh.
Okay. And that's the direction. That's a main lobe, side lobes, and rear lobes.
Yeah.
The triangle they're drawing is right here. That's called the best coverage area. I don't give a damn if my client has 5 bars of signal or 1 bar signal. I care where they could be and still make a phone call. For this on 4G, 28 miles from a cell tower.
Geez.
That's a long way. These wedges they draw are usually 3 miles, maybe 3 to 5 miles. So they're using a concept for best coverage area to try to show the actual coverage area of a cell tower, which they're unrelated. Sectors are like schematics. They're not to be used for cell antenna. Now you say, well, who's Andrew? What? You could go look this stuff up. I mean, you can go to the manufacturer of the actual antenna, like Ericsson, and go pull their RF spec sheets online and show the radio frequency pattern, right? You can see those things. That's very simple. Or you could go in the field and drive test. We have drive test equipment here. So we go in the field, we have antennas on top of the vehicle, we drive around and it takes cellular measurements, and then it builds this map of the cell phone coverage. And what's interesting is, like, even last week in DC, the government drew these wedges. We drove test. And then after we drove test, they pulled up drive test data, which showed that the crime scene wasn't even covered by the cell tower. But in their first maps, it was covered by the cell tower. In which you use. So they're using the triangle to say, well, we established that the defendant was well within this triangle here. But when they used drive test data, real engineering measurements in the field, it showed that the defendant was not within the cell phone coverage of the cell tower, which changed all their testimony. But what's really interesting is that drive test data is 2 years old. They've had it for 2 years. So they buried it and didn't show it. They only use it when they need it. And they got caught with their pants down, and they look foolish on the witness stand. That happens all the time in our cases. I have last month 4 felony murder cases dismissed over cell evidence. We have case all time about 60 in the last 2.5 years that the government removed all the cell data out of the case. Because it's guesswork versus scientific measurements.
Yeah, makes sense.
And what they guessed, and they guessed horribly. My understanding is you got a mountain range, and you have a cell tower they said was used here and here, so therefore he drove in a road from here to here.
Yeah.
My understanding is he hiked up to the top of the mountain, and you can communicate with both towers. So it has nothing to do with where you drove. The driving, you don't know where somebody drove, and there's not actually, if you look at the cell coverage in that area, you could go to websites like Cell Mapper, and Cell Mapper actually is collecting data from people's mobile phones. It doesn't have their phone number, but it has their advertiser tag ID and has a GPS location, which transmits. That's why Google knows where you're at if you're looking for pizza, right? You look in Google, I want pizza, and it says, hey, the store down the road has pizza. So the reason they know that is because they know your GPS location, but that's not shared with law enforcement, and that's not identifiable to a person. It's a device, and they don't know that whether that device is actually connected to an account or not. They just know it's a device, right? So they collect all this data, so you can see in Cell Mapper the actual cell tower and where it broadcasts to online live feeding. Right now you can see thousands of people on Cell Mapper reporting their locations, and you can see the south side of that mountain range has no coverage, 0.
Jeez.
So the ability to say somebody even drove there is just nonsense. It just doesn't make sense.
In this case, with Bryan Kohberger, they have him a similar path down and around to get to Pullman. Do you suspect that information is inaccurate, or do you suspect that maybe he could have been anywhere in between those two areas? And do you know now? I mean, I'm not sure if you would know, but it sounds like they have some drive test data. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, my understanding is they went and they actually did some real, I mean, probable cause for a search warrant's much different than drive testing and after the fact, right?
Right.
Or let's arrest somebody off some fictitious science and then we'll go from there. But here's the question. Here's the question the government always has to answer that they won't answer. We know we got a cell phone, right? And we know there's a cell phone record because we know we have a date and time of a phone call or text message or data session. Either way. Okay, let's just use phone call. So you got your cell phone here. We know the longitude, latitude of a cell tower, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know where this is located.
Yeah.
So we know it's located, right? What we really need, and we know the phone has to be within the radio frequency coverage of that tower. Those are the three things we know that are facts, absolute 100% facts. You got a phone, you got a phone call, and you got a location of a cell tower that was used. The question we have is, what does the footprint of that cell tower look like? Now, let me give you a real reality of what these things really look like. And I'm going to pull up a different case for you just to show you. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So let's see here. I'm pulling it up right now, and let's go down here. So,
and if you need to share anything, let me know. We can pull that up too.
Yep. I'm going to share something right now. All righty. This is unscripted. Sorry, everybody. We're just shooting the crap. So let's see here. I'm going to. Can I share part of my screen? Share slides or PDF? Here we go. All right. Let's see here. Here we go. All right. I'm learning new. Haven't been on your show. Learning all these buttons. Okay. See this case right here? Nice little wedges, right? That's what you see in all these cases. Let me scroll down. Guess what the actual cell coverage really looks like? That looks nothing like just a wedge, does it?
Not at all.
Not even close. And this brown scattered stuff, you're like, okay, so this tower at the bottom right here, see that little square I put around there?
Yeah.
Has coverage all the way up to here. That's the green. You know why? Because that's on a hillside, so the radio antenna hits it. So,
well, that makes sense.
Screen sharing. So so you've got terrain is a huge deal too. If we take this, you've got for 4G antennas, you have what's called downward tilt, which basically means you got a cell tower, right?
Yeah.
Like the antenna that's up there is tilted. They tilt it. So then the radio signal goes like this. And that's the coverage area. There's no coverage here. It's out here.
Yeah.
So if you don't know the downward tilt, you got a problem. You can't even estimate the coverage. Or second of all, which do you think broadcasts further?
Probably the taller one, no?
Taller one. You have to know the height of the cell tower. You know why? If you got a building that's right here and this antenna is strapped to the side of Starbucks, it's not going that way. It's going to bounce off that and head that direction. It's going to go totally opposite direction. Their cell antennas are installed that shoot right towards the building to bounce it the other way to go around the building. So you have all these radio signals. It's like taking a laser pointer in a house of mirrors and you're bouncing it around everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So typical cell antenna broadcasting this direction, which always has some this way and some this way and some this way on a single antenna, not three antennas on a tower. One, right?
Yeah.
You could have coverage that looks like this. And you could have a spot of coverage out here called an island of coverage. And it could be like this and like this. Nothing looks like what the government's putting together. What the government's putting together is a schematic of how the network is laid out. It has nothing to do with reality of the real cell phone coverage. They're walking into court and telling the judge, hey, there's this nice, beautiful triangle, and the defendant is in that triangle. Our suspect is in the triangle, and that's what we want to warrant. We want to do all these things, and none of that is reality. You'll see, you don't see cell engineers testifying in these cases because they won't. They actually have disclaimers on the data that comes from the cell carrier that says we will not testify to the veracity or accuracy of any of this data. They won't testify at all.
Oh, wow.
And that's a big, big red flag. Like, don't do it. And instead of doing the real work and getting an engineer or going out there with test equipment, testing it, they take the easy route, draw some triangles, bamboozle the court into thinking that's correct, and they get what they want. The problem is they primarily go unchallenged because our industry is filled with 95% ex-cops on the defense side.
Yeah.
So they either went to the 2-day bad school to learn the world's flat, and they still believe it's flat, and they will die on the cross for it. It's flat. And I'm telling them the world's round. I'm sorry, it's not flat. And then we pull out textbooks from college, we pull out engineering data, and we show them how wrong they are, and they will still say they're right. They will argue till they're blue in the face and say they're correct. And, oh, the radio signal follows the perfect arc and triangle. If you walk 10 feet outside of it, you don't have self coverage. It's all this nonsense. Like, that's the cell carriers quit testifying for the government about 10 years ago because of this. There's some nice emails from T-Mobile to the FBI that says we are not going to testify in your cases anymore. Jeez. And there's a nice 18-page resignation letter by somebody it was a blue badge at CAST, which means they were a civilian PhD, who with the FBI cellular analysis survey team that sent it to the director talking about the horrible bad science that they're using. And, I'm waiting I always kind of laugh because I get on the witness stand and just destroy these cases for the prosecutor. They should just remove that data out. They have plenty of other data to use the other stuff that's real science. But if they don't, and one day I'm going to wait for the right time, I'm going to pull out the letter from the one of the top people in their units saying, hey, this is horribly bad science, and I'm going to put it out in the public record. But I'm waiting. It's got to be the right case, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you on that one.
Drop the curtain.
You got to strike when the iron is hot, and when that iron is the right iron too. I guess
there's value in holding secrets.
Exactly. That's true. That is true. Now, Ann Taylor's defense team, obviously, they for whatever reason moved on to Cy-Ray. Now, Cy-Ray has indicated a couple of things, saying that he thinks whatever they can pull from the cell data is exculpatory for Bryan Kohberger. However, it sounds like his phone was off around 2:54, so I don't know how it's exculpatory or anything about that far away, but there was this concern about the 7 minutes that went on. The PCA says the phone turned off like at 2:47. It was 2:54. How important is 7 minutes in this instance, and what do you think about that?
Nothing. Happens all the time. I mean, everybody's phone dies about every day once, and then you turn it back on. There is a log file inside. They're called PRR log if it's an iPhone, and other for Android. And it tells you what the battery life was. It tells you when the phone got turned off and turned on, and whether the user invoked the button to turn it on, that kind of stuff. Keeps track of all that information. So we know for a fact whether or not a phone is turned on or off. That's easy to figure out. What happens during the 7 minutes? The phone's off. The phone's off. The phone's off. I mean, even if it was shut off, shut off and shut back on, sometimes it's because you have bad cell phone service. I mean, to try to correlate that to anything would be like saying, for these million phones that we just analyzed, 996,000 of them got shut off in the last 24 hours and turned back on, that somehow all that's nefarious. It's just nonsense. Like, none of that is relevant. Now, it's different if you said, okay, somebody shut off a phone, and then when they turn back on the phone, during the time it was off, there's call records that show a call was made. Somebody's going to have some explaining to do when the phone was off, right?
Yeah.
But absent that, it's kind of just irrelevant. 7 minutes is not like, I mean,
Yeah.
people know their phone's tracked. I mean, we all do. We all know that at least you could tell what cell tower it's communicating with. And then there is other engineering data sets. We call them timing advanced data.
Uh-huh.
And there's a problem with that. And there's a problem with the way this is getting presented too. And I can explain it to you. This is I think you'll like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a factory. Me and you are, right?
Yeah.
And I get you. And you're on one factory line, and I'm over here, and I'm just monitoring the cookie pans that come across. Okay. Dave gets cookie pan one, and Joe gets the other, and Tracy gets third. This is how cell phone data works. You have a channel, and everybody's data is going together, but you get a frame. This is called a frame. Your data actually only occupies part of the frame. Okay. It's that big. The frame's wide, your data is little. Your data is your call, voice call, text, whatever. It's all carried over data. Okay. Over here, Dan, it's over here, and you're watching this, and you see how the data shifted a little to the left, a little to the right. You know what that tells you? The timing over here is incorrect. I need to either speed up or slow down.
Okay.
Okay. Then you yell at me, hey, add +2. So I take my dial and I turn it up, and this could be, let's say, a cookie dropper, and it's dropping cookies in the middle of a pan in a factory.
Right.
Okay. If the cookie dropper goes further away, there's a delay before it hits the pan. It's going to shift over, right? That's the same delay you get when you're driving away from a cell tower. There's a delay in your signal getting to you. So the uplink and downlink have to match. Mm-hmm. So you yell across the factory, +2. I turn my little dial, +2. But I don't tell you I did +2. I just stand there and say nothing and look at you. And you yell +5, and I move it +5. Okay? You said +2, then you said +5. Then you say +30. I don't hear you. I didn't get the transmission. You know why? Cellular has a 3 to 15% loss in data.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't get it. And then you yell at me again because I'm still off, right? You're seeing it's coming across, and I'm way over here, and I need to be shifted back towards the center. You tell me +30 again. See what happens? My timing advance at the cell tower now says 2 + 5 + 30. I'm at 37. Okay.
Yeah.
If I accepted everything, you're at 37 here. But if I missed one, my accumulator now shows +7 because there's no acknowledgement. So timing advance is not designed to find location, because what they're doing is they're taking the speed of light. They're doing a calculation saying based on the delay says you're 1.5 miles out from the cell tower.
All right.
That's based off this thing being correct. It can't be correct. There's so much loss out in the network. It's not correct because there's not a two-way check. I don't say, hey, you say, Dan says +2, and I go, I got you, +2. I change it. Yeah. You say me +2. If I don't receive it, you still think I adjusted by +2. And the reason, and people say, well, the timing advance that's coming across, if it's not shifted correctly, then you must have not received the +2, Andrew. No. It could be the factor I'm just driving further away from the cell tower.
Yeah, so, that's what I was going to say.
To give you an idea, we have a case right now, and the FBI is about to have a huge surprise, because not only do they have the timing advance so far off, they got them backwards. Verizon sent a letter saying, hey, guess what? The timing advance from the connection tower and the disconnection tower, we got them backwards. The numbers for the last 3 years, and it says you're 500 meters out here. It says you're 2,000 meters out here, and 500 meters out from the house is the crime scene. They had them swapped, so they think the guy's at the crime scene instead of 5,000 meters out or whatever from the house.
Jeez.
Absolutely backwards. They need to go back and do a review of every single case they've ever used this on for the last 3 years. Ever.
Jeez. Yeah,
it seems backwards. It's just nonsense. And these are the same people, the same individuals that Cyray worked with, that he supports, and they built all the software to do all this stuff based off stuff that's just not correct. I mean, it's the blind leading the blind, because, and matter of fact, so I went as far as going, let me tell you, I went to London for drive test school, worked with the guys in China who developed this stuff, worked at Ericsson's Quality Assurance Laboratory, went to Florida Institute of Technology Cellular Engineering School, went down there and hired the professors to teach us very specialized stuff. Then turned around, hired 2 cell engineers, the best you could hire that have patents in their name. And then I went even further. I went to the patent holders who designed the technology and sat down with them. And their exact response was, you should never use this in court. I have that in writing from them. And I gave that to law enforcement, and law enforcement says they're wrong. Okay, the guy who invented the technology is wrong. They will not back down. They won't. They'll die on the hill for this because they've used it, and they've used it in 10,000 cases, and they just will die on the hill for it. They don't care.
Yeah, they'd have to go back and relook at a bunch of things, and especially those that still have like ability to get lawyers to go back and look at a bunch of things. So
and it takes time. Appeals are slow. I mean, even if somebody came and said, hey, this guy's completely innocent, he needs out, and the prosecutor agrees, it's still 5 years before they can get him out of jail. They have to have an appeal. They have to have another trial.
Now, with the advanced timing records, he made a pretty strong accusation that they should have had Bryan Kohberger's timing advance records. AT&T comes back saying that they only hold them for 7 days at that time. Does that sound accurate to you, or do you think that Cyray was onto something when he was saying that there's back doors and things of that nature that you can get those things still?
So there's always this battle between privacy and the telco. Okay. So on one hand, you have the privacy advocates saying, don't keep this data, it's location data, and I want my privacy, right? And I've debated at the National Press Club with Apple and Verizon, everybody's there. Like, we've had these big public debates there, and I get called in once in a while to talk about this stuff. But you have the privacy advocates. Then you have the government saying, we want you to record everything. Now, there's other sets of data called minimization of drive test data, MDT data. They have the exact location of the phone. The problem is they don't share it. Because if they did, they would be strung up in front of Congress trying to answer for all this, right? So there are data sets, and everybody puts a blind eyes, puts their hands over their ears, that the government can get if necessary, but they won't, because there's always this fear that some congressman's going to shut it all down. I mean, it's kind of like Google location data. Google had this goofy thing going on where they draw a box around a house and say, between 2 o'clock and 2:05 p.m., I want you to give me everybody's cell phone that was in that box, right?
Yeah.
And when they did so, then they would come back and say, well, we can't give you names and numbers and all that stuff because that would violate people's rights. But we can give you these crazy graphical usernames, like, anonymized stuff, right? And then from the anonymized stuff and the history of that anonymized stuff, if you pick the right one and tell us, we'll give you data on that one person. It was like this weird game that they were playing. I'm like, if law enforcement asks for it and they think they can support it in court, just give it to them. Why play this game where it's like, here's a pool of 20 people's stuff, and you have to decipher which one's the right suspect. And then if you do, then if you hit pay dirt and you hit guess right correctly, we'll give you all the data on that person, right? That's what they were doing. That has been shut down. You can't do that anymore. I mean, they got sued in court. They lost. They all said no more. That's the kind of shell game that's played. But there are massive data sets that the cell carrier collects. So there's different types of ranging data, as we call it, timing advance. You got True Call, Nelos, PCMD, and RTT. RTT's Verizon, True Calls, T-Mobile. They all have their own flavor, their own brand, but they basically do the same thing. They measure delay and uplink and downlink, and they try to figure out distance you are from the tower. But understand, here's the missing concept in all those technologies. It's measuring a range, not a distance. We all say distance, sometimes it's a range. Cell towers point in that direction. It says 1,000 meters out, okay, is where the cell tower phone has to be in that specific arc.
Right.
What if there's a building right here and it bounces off here, and that's now my 1,000 meters?
Interesting.
And we all know it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a sixth grader in school to know that if you spray a water hose against a wall, and you're going to get splashed back at your, you as a kid, we're all outside spraying the hose at each other. You just spray
Right.
somebody and they get too close to you, you're like, you're getting me wet, right? Same exact thing. Radio signal broadcast, it bounces off stuff. It goes everywhere all the time. It's total path distance is what they're calculating, not distance from the tower. If it's clear line of sight, open field, right? Nothing in the way. No trees, nothing, just desert, right? Then that calculation would probably be perfect. But outside of that, no.
What about like time that a person might be in a specific area? So, for instance, in the recent documents, law enforcement and prosecution are indicating that Bryan Kohberger was within 100 meters of the house 23 different times between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., which is an odd hour. So maybe perhaps a limited amount of people might be on the using cell services while they're asleep. So how accurate do you think those locations by Nick Balance, special FBI agent?
Absolute nonsense. Here's why. Because the timing advance record saying this is the maximum. And remember, I said range. So they're taking a cell tower and they're saying, based on this range, if we drew a straight perfect line over to the house, he's within 100 meters of the house.
Right.
But here's the deal. If you're within 100 meters of the house, that did not pitch you at the house. It pitched you 100 meters out, right?
Right.
If that thing's so accurate, that just gave him an alibi that he's not at the house. He's 100 meters away at that exact time. So, but think about path. If your path goes this way, then this way, you could be short by 500 meters. You could be the opposite direction. Okay, and still pick up cell tower. Now, to give you an idea, we were just in Mammoth Lakes, California, and then my engineer flew to Ogden. Okay, both drive testing. There are cases where the cell towers pointed north, and we were 6 miles the opposite direction, still getting cell coverage. It was bouncing off something, and we're getting cell coverage, but we were getting coverage in one place. But if we moved over 300 meters over here, we wouldn't have cell coverage. It's because these things fly everywhere. And let me show you this. So you could go to a website, cellmapper.net. Not that I hang my hat on everything Cellmapper does, but it's a good visualization tool just to kind of get the lay of the land of what's going on. So let me show this to you. And sorry for I'm not going to log in, but a bunch of advertisements all over the screen. So give me a second here.
No problem. The 100 meter thing, though, I don't think that law enforcement was saying that he was in the house. I think they were trying to say he was surveilling the house outside of it from within 100 meters from the house.
He could be totally the opposite way. See that right there?
Let me pull that up real quick.
Look at that. Look how far out and crazy the cell phone coverage is from that one cell tower.
Yeah.
So if they're doing ranging data and they're saying, well, the person could be out here, you could be completely opposite. You could be 50 feet from the cell tower, not 1,000 yards from the cell tower. And what's really interesting about all that is I actually have the FBI's training guide on this. And I'm going to show you a page of this. And you'll love this. Let me go in here. Let's go to cast. All right. So let me show you their brand new field resource guide. That's their training guide on this. Now, all these things I get in Discovery, they always freak out and say, how'd you get it? I get it in Discovery from a case. If the prosecutor gives it to me, it's mine. Unless they want to file some state secret out of it, I'm keeping it. So let's see here. And let me go here. Timing advanced data. All right. So here we go. Let me share my screen again. All righty, Dan, you're going to like this. Take a look at this. Locations and radius readings over 1,000 meters should not be considered accurate. Right from their own training books.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know that there's been a lot of stuff that's been in the cast, FBI cast stuff, that has been somewhat contradictory to what they're saying. And, I know that Ray, he's thrown out some things. He's kind of stepped in it himself. If you came out with what Ray has said, would you testify after the fact once everything has come out, or would you try to like wash your hands? What would your recommendations if you knew somebody who was in Ray's position?
Well, I mean, so think about it. Ray spent his career supporting law enforcement, right? He
Yeah.
developed software that got bought that did those nice little wedges, like here's the direction. Then, so think about this. If we know the phone used a tower and the tower is here, and we know the direction of the tower, let's say the tower's here, and the direction's pointed north, but we know
Yeah.
there's signal south, east, and west because of side lobes and rear lobes, okay? Can you tell the directionality? No.
No.
You don't know. You're either in the coverage or out of the coverage. You cannot tell where the phone is at within that coverage. It's impossible.
Hmm.
Either you can make a phone call or can't make a phone call. That's the answer.
Yeah.
So when his software was built, he built these nice little triangles. He built this funny shaped wedge. It showed a little bit of coverage on the backside and then this funny wedge. That's been thrown out. Courts all over the place saying it's completely incorrect. Engineers have said this is completely incorrect. You can't just generalize, right? There's an IEEE white paper on this too that says you can't do that.
Yeah.
And he made a bunch of money doing that, right? And he did. And a lot of people weren't challenged because nobody wanted to take on the government, right? You get up in these cases, nobody wants to wake up in the morning and says, I would love to challenge the FBI today, right? It's like a level of scrutiny you don't want because they don't make it about the case. They make it about you and your everything in the world you've ever done. And they're like, oh, well, you went to school here in 6th grade. I actually had this question asked to me once. He says, Mr. Garrett, we looked in your background in 6th grade. You got in a fist fight with a kid on the playground, didn't you? I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's like 44 years ago in my life. Like, I have no idea. I'm like, please remind me who this is so I can go apologize, right? Like I'm very flippant in court when somebody gets stupid like that and asks dumb questions. But it's one of these things that becomes everything about everything. Well, how much does your company make a year? Where'd your family come from? Was your dad a poor guy? Did he work in a factory? Did you learn anything from him? Did he teach you any engineering stuff? How did you learn all this stuff? Who did you talk to? And like it becomes everything but the case, right? So
Right.
when you're taking on the government head to head and you're right, they'll flip it and try to like do all kinds of salacious things. I caught the government once trying to create and fabricate a criminal history for me. They got caught. The officer was removed from the force immediately. And the
Jeez.
problem with him trying to create a criminal history for me is he put a date and time for it in this report in which I was in Bosnia in the Navy. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
well, you could have picked any other time in the world and maybe, tried to make this any bit valid whatsoever. But I was literally, here's my military service jacket. I was in Bosnia in the US Navy. It's like ground pounding.
Jeez.
So, it gets nasty. When I say it gets nasty, it gets really, really nasty. I'm talking about, and I don't believe in the whole Blackhawks and over your house and they're staring at you with cameras and stuff like that. Oh no, I have it where I've actually been in the hallway where they've literally said if we could have a hitman kill you, we would kill you. I
Yeah.
mean, some of these you got to realize you're taking somebody and you're basically saying the way you're doing it is wrong. It's like removing their religion.
Yeah.
It's like taking and saying, "Hey, guess what? Christianity's false.
Mhm.
I know you're a Christian, but Christianity is false, and I now have proof of another religion being true and accurate." And they just can't. They don't want to hear it. They
Yeah.
don't. And I always tell when I get asked in the witness stand what my job is, I say I'm an educator. My job is to
Mhm.
educate the jury, the judge about the facts of the case so they can make the proper decisions today. That is my job. So for Ray, I think the problem is he spent a long time supporting law enforcement. I do believe he's a smart guy. I think he's got their secrets. Is clearly I saw his affidavit. He knows their secrets. He knows that he's basically to me, and this is just my opinion, this is unsupported. This is not fact. But the way I look at this is this. He's basically tipping his hand just enough to say, I know all your secrets. Keep playing with me and I'll dump them all on the street.
Right.
And that's what I
Kind
think
of the
he's
sense
doing.
I got.
Yeah, I have a sense that he's saying that. And we that have been doing this a long time, we know those same secrets. But if you dump them on the street, it's not a gentleman's game at the card table.
Right.
It's now going to be dirty, dirty pool, and they're going to come after you with everything guns blazing. Right. And I say it, that's something you don't want. You want to keep it professional at all times. I know a lot of the government secrets. I mean, I literally have former people that worked for CAST and everything else like that have written me long, lengthy letters about stuff and problems they've had, and issues they've had with the evidence. But I'm not going to dump that on the street. There's no sense in it. Let's keep it to the science. Let's keep it above board, and let's do our jobs.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. Size in a situation, I think now that what he needs to do is explain the science behind timing advance. Unfortunately, is you can read on the bottom of T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon's disclaimers, they will not testify to it. They won't explain to you how it works, and they won't stand behind it. That's because it's not designed to determine distance from a tower.
Interesting.
It was designed to correct timing problems in communication, not to measure distance. The distance part had to do with the calculation the FBI wanted done.
So if the phone has like the capabilities of giving you exact timing with GPS and things of that nature, why do you think law enforcement still uses these tactics?
No. That's a different set of data. That data is only kept on the phone.
Right,
so without
right.
the phone, they don't have that. All they have is the network data.
Right, but they got Bryan Kohberger's phone.
None of what we talked about is GPS.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
Right. What I'm saying is they got Bryan Kohberger's phone. Why are they still sticking to this versus his GPS data on his phone? What would make you think
it may not be on? If it was turned off, then you got no data.
Perfect.
And that happens a lot.
Answer.
Like we get cases all the time where we look at the case and we're like, let's get the phone. We get the phone and there's no GPS data on it at all. I'm stone cold dead in the water. No, if somebody took a photo or something that had GPS embedded inside of it, think about this. If I send you a photo on my iPhone, I got the new 16 Pro last week. If I take a 16 Pro iPhone and send you a photo I took to your phone and you save it locally, one could look at your phone and say, hey, you were at the place I took the photo, date and time, because they don't know the difference. You can't tell which phone it was taken on. You just know it was taken on an iPhone 16 Pro. So it's very easy to get things wrong based on GPS embedded inside of like a photo. Now, if you have stuff like Waze or Life 360, any of that stuff like that, but Verizon Track Navigator, something like that. That's data you're not only collecting on the phone because it's talking to 3, 5, or 7 satellites in outer space, and it's taking the timing of those, which it knows the timing from checking the internet. It syncs them all together and gives you a fixed position, right? Mm-hmm. Then if you take that data is either stored on the phone sometimes or it's stored in the cloud, like Google. If you go to google.com/locate or google.com/takeout, you can download your location data and you can see where you've driven to, right?
Yeah.
It'll show you that. But if the phone's GPS is not on, none of that's happening. All those apps are dead. They're not working.
Interesting. Well, I know that they have certain apps like Strava that gave some GPS location and stuff like that based off the warrant. So we'll see. But it sounds like to me that he probably had a lot of those things turned off while he was doing his thing, due to the fact that they're using this instead of GPS locations. They're using, his network connections and call data and stuff like that. Now, you guys did something else. You guys looked into a possible connection with Bryan Kohberger on social media, or looked into his social media with a program called Shadow Dragon. Is that accurate?
Yep. Full disclaimer, we did not get paid or was asked to do that. This was live while I'm in conversation with the defense team. I ran what's called a Shadow Dragon report. Little did I know how much controversy that would stir up at a later date, because I started receiving phone calls like a year into the case of how we did it, who we were working with, if we were working with the prosecution or defense, and nobody knew about this. And I said, what are you talking about? Nobody knew about this. This is like very public data. How'd you not know about this? And Shadow Dragon, the company, did a little article on it. And then what happened was, it's like, I think maybe 6 or 9 months in, something like that, I got a phone call and said, well, since you're not working for the defense, would you share it with the family? I said, sure. So I just ripped an email out and sent it to the family's attorney and said, I think you ought to at least see this, right?
Mhm.
um, and yeah, you got it on my website there. I got it pulled up too. And Shadow Dragon, basically, it's a tool, and let me explain to you what it does. The government and our intel community use this for a long time. I got involved with the individuals at Shadow Dragon because um, I was doing some volunteer consulting with some human trafficking groups. Um, and law enforcement sometimes is surprised to that because they go, "Why is a guy that does criminal defense work even involved in groups like that?" Look, we're people, and they advise with us too, right? We got a big problem, and the way I look at human trafficking is a lot of it can be curbed by the social media companies stopping the stuff from being transmitted online, sexual abuse material, without if they don't deliver it to the other side, they already know it's bad. That's going to curb the behavior of a bunch of people and stop it dead in its tracks. Instead, the government wants everybody to deliver it to their side so they can get 2 arrests instead of 1, right?
Mm.
They want the person that sent it to somebody and the person that received it. So I've been a real advocate for using tools like an antivirus of types to get rid of sexual abuse material, period. Just delete it, destroy it from all the networks, and everybody that has it, just burn it from the world. So I volunteer. Well, one of these groups I was volunteering with, which Howard Buffett brought me into, do some consulting for a little bit. And yeah, the Buffett Foundation, Warren Buffett, Howard Buffett, right? He grew up down the well, I grew up down the road from him per se, 15 miles away from each other. But I owned a forensic laboratory in Decatur, Illinois, and half of that laboratory I rented out to the Republican local legislator, and him and they were buddies, and we met a long time ago. We started communicating. I'd say we're friends, right? We go to breakfast when I'm in town together, and he's one of the richest people in the world. Well, he says, "Hey, I want you to introduce you to some people," and I spent a bunch of time with them talking about technology and helping them out understand some things because we do a lot of sex trafficking cases. We fly around the world. I was in Nepal last year. I was in Doha, Qatar. I was in South Philippines doing investigations and sex crime
Hmm.
work. Well, in doing that, one of the law enforcement entities that they give money to, a massive amount of money to, he gives away a couple $100 million a year, had a list of tools they wanted to buy, right? And on that list of tools was Shadow Dragon. And I had never heard of them before, which is surprising. And I called them up, says, "Gentlemen, I'd like a demo of your stuff." And they says, "Well, you got it. Are you CIA, DIA, FBI? What are you?" And I was like, "Neither nor." And they was like, "Yeah, no, we're not going to demo it to you." It's kind of laughed at me and said, "Not a chance." And I said, "Well, gentlemen, I got like X millions of dollars." And the answer was, "Yes, Daddy, where you want us to show it to you at?" And I was like, "Okay." So we had this meeting and they showed it to me and my mouth hit the floor, to be honest. I was like, "Whoa, wait a second. Are you telling me I go to Facebook and I type in Dan's phone number and it won't find your Facebook profile, but if I go to Shadow Dragon and type in Dan's phone number, it'll find it for me?"
Hmm.
That seems like you're doing something that shouldn't be done. No, no, no. The social media companies made APIs that answer all those questions for you. They just didn't publish them to everybody.
Hmm.
Shadow Dragon went out and sourced all these APIs that allow them to do things that nobody else in the world could do. So they built this platform. And then after a couple deals later, I says, "Would you sell to me?" It was like the price tag on it was stupid. It was like more than a house and boat in Miami. It was just
Oh, geez.
ridiculous. And I was like, "Oh." So I convinced them to basically give me a license at like 5% of what they would sell it for, just because I got a couple deals for them, right?
Yeah.
Then we built this relationship, and now they sell it to a lot of people, right? They started selling it to commercial companies all over and investigators and stuff. As long as you have the funds to do it, it's expensive. It's not cheap. It's not
Yeah.
cheap at all. It's really expensive. But what it does, it gives me the ability to go in and take somebody's background check. So I can see their GBLA, GPPA, and CIC background check and get all the data about them, social security card number, their date of birth, and all that stuff. And you can load it into Shadow Dragon, and then it hunts. It will find, for instance, I had a case, the George Dixon case out of Idaho.
Mhm.
In this case, a girl had accused him of raping her. And to find out, we ran her and Shadow Dragon. We found all these accounts, but we found this account for a dog. And then when we transformed on the dog had photos that matched hers. So we knew that was her dog, right? We figured it out because we found a picture of her with the dog and found the dog. And the dog had an account, was also linked to this from somebody else. And when we looked at that one and dug into it, we found the girl's FetLife account where she was advertising for forced rape play and selling the videos. She absolutely got burned in court nationally. They put her on like CBS News nationwide with the actual prosecutor saying, we had to dismiss the case. Rightfully so. The defendant is not guilty. And they had to admit to it. He wasn't guilty. She recorded a video and was using it inappropriately and basically accusing people of stuff they didn't do. And, she got caught up in her little game she was playing. And it was all because of Shadow Dragon. So then we started running Shadow Dragon on a bunch of like old cases and our mouths hit the floor. We're like, wow, we missed some data here and there. And it'll show you everything. Like it absolutely will show you every tweet, post, everything all pulled together, no limitations. It'll show you your friends, relationships. And what's interesting is you can use it to show like, which you and I are not connected on social media, but we will after this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It'll show like me and you. It'll show all these things. It'll show all these pictures. And then it'll give us significant events that we were at together. And we may not even know we were at the same event together, but it'll tell me that. It'll say you both were at the state fair together on January 5th. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. It is the all-seeing eye of social media. You cannot hide from it. It's really good at what it does.
And
I can't be a bigger fan than I am for those guys because it saves us. Before, you have a bunch of PI firms out hunting and pecking on Google to try to tie everything together. Now we go to one platform and say, go search, go hunt. And find all this stuff from you. You got to vet it afterwards, right? You just don't run with it. You got to vet it. And that's what I have to say about the report on Kohberger. That is not vetted. But what that is that is literally 7 days post-incident. So that is pretty fresh data, you could say. It's not, though nobody talked about it for a year afterwards. They're like, well, a year afterwards, all these fake accounts were built. Look, this was 7 days. And I don't think anybody even understood what was really going on at that time.
Right. And when you looked at it within that 7 days, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. You mentioned that you could see where people were in certain places at the same time. Did you see that with Bryan Kohberger? Not from
what you're seeing there. No. Okay. You have to go back and this thing is like a zillion layers deep, right? What you're seeing is this like summary report and visualization of what the connections looked like. And the only thing I really found between the victims and Kohberger was they were connected on Instagram.
Yeah, I went through here and I looked at it and I noticed a couple of things. First, let's talk about what is this first picture with a bunch of little images.
That would be the relationships between him and other people. See the lines in between, and then those people and other people that had to do with anything to do with the victims. So the victims are in there. So you've got now. I didn't even save this. If you want to see how like it's like not as important to me as we threw it up there because it was a great example of Shadow Dragon's use, so we could show our clients. But what it does is we are mapping out the victims and Kohberger's social media data to see if there's relationships between the two and who all they're related to. Every person on there on that graph basically had some kind of link somewhere that linked to either the victims or back to Kohberger, right? So basically said if he's friends with somebody that's friends with them, it would show on there. So you see these little like fingers that come out like it's like a bunch of fingers. That means he's related. He's got a connection to those people that are connected to the one of the victims.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, Dateline mentioned that he was following a lot of people who were friends of the victims, but they never really tied it in together. So what information did you use to pull this up, and where did you get that? I'm assuming it was an email that you used from his
background check.
Background check. Okay.
any company that has access through Clear, like at the airport, right? You
Yeah.
can subscribe to Clear. Now, don't
Okay.
get me wrong, they come out and they got to visit your facility and videotape it, make sure you got security in place and all this stuff, because you can do things in there that require certain levels of access and security. Like if I want to demask somebody's social security card number, I better have a legal reason why, right? Maybe fiduciary duty, maybe it's by order of the court. But if you just want to run regular background check, the same as your employer runs when you get hired,
Yeah.
um, and get name, phone number, address, what happens is in background check data, like through Clear or through Thomson Reuters, IRB, TLO, LexisNexis, all that stuff, they collect data. And what happens is, let's say you apply for a credit card and you
Mhm.
use a brand new email address. They will track that application and that email address and that phone number you use. And let's say you did it from your home IP address. Let's say your home IP address is 74.139.50.50. And you do 10 transactions like that from your home over a 2-year period. They're going
Yeah.
to put like a confidence rating of like 90% that that's your home address, IP address. So they not only
Right.
know your IP address and your phone numbers and your emails, so they keep all this in the databases. We run a background check, we grab that data, and then we start using that as the thread to pull on in Shadow Dragon. That's how
Mm.
that works. So you have to have
And
something, if you just had just an alias, you might not get as far as if you had like a full scope background check on somebody, because you're getting a bunch of data on them out of the
right.
background check.
And if I know I had looked at it a couple of times, so here they are. Let's see, aliases. I recall here the email address, and I remember seeing these email addresses on documents, and I'd asked, I'd informed Steve, father of Kaylee, that we were doing this interview, and he'd said that he had a question. He asked, which email accounts were used to compile your report, and do those same accounts or their associate IDs appear in the official court records? In other words, if these accounts are deemed reliable enough for legal proceedings, why wouldn't they be considered fully accurate for your report?
Oh, different set of data. Like
Okay.
the email addresses, probably these came from the actual official background check. It's not even official. I mean, background checks are like still not even valid data. It's like whatever he filled out in some form somewhere where he got a credit card from Walmart.
Mhm.
That's the email address that he put down, right? That's probably where those emails came from. That is used to search the social media platforms. But here's the real reality. If I went to a social media platform that required no verification by email, the verification's by phone, I could put in Bryan.Kohberger at wsu.edu, but put in a phone number, let's say 217-555-1212. And if I get the text message to validate the account, it's now validated with that email address. See my problem? I'm not even Bryan Kohberger, and I created an account with his name on it.
Understood.
So you have to be that's why this is the basis you would use to start issuing search warrants to the email providers, to Instagram and stuff like this. I got told that law enforcement got a copy of this very quickly after I sent it over. A girl who did a podcast actually like shared with me an email, sent me an email out of the blue and says, "Hey, I'm a podcaster. I've got this email between the family and like the attorney, and I need to know, is this real?" And I was like, "Well, I wasn't part of it. I have no idea." Um, I said, "But the data that's associated with that, I know where that came from. That came from our office."
Mhm.
And so my understanding is they were well aware of these things. They just don't have Shadow Dragon at that law enforcement facility, and I don't think they had it at the FBI then. It was pretty new. Um, but if I had this kind of report, due diligence is they should have ran down everything in it, every piece of
Yeah.
this. I would have been calling either Shadow Dragon and subscribing, get a demo, or I would have been calling me and saying, "Hey, give me the data behind this. Give me the transform files and all the stuff that shows how this came to be." And I would have ran down every piece of it.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I definitely would have too. I mean, there's some interesting things here. I have, this says here Instagram users, it says 10,000, 1,089. I noticed that it's in alphabetical order, and then it stops and then it goes again in alphabetical order. Are these two different types of lists? Are these like, following and followed? Do you know why they're separated that way?
No idea. I
Okay.
haven't looked at this in a long time. But
Okay.
typically, it would show the difference, like followed or following, something like that. I know the new reports do, but
Yeah.
um, yeah.
And so this one says here, like I highlighted a couple of things. It says like one is 1112 KED. I mean, that one popped out right away when I saw that. I mean, yes, the murders happened on the 13th of November. However, it was a Friday night leading into Saturday morning. That Friday was the 12th. So that was interesting. But we do see Maddie and Kaylee among this list. Now, in your research, which is on the second list, after it goes through its alphabetical order and then it starts again,
Mhm.
on the second list, it has Kaylee Jade and then Madison Mogen. Do you know when he's followed these? Because I think that would
No.
play a role, right? So no,
Yeah,
can't tell.
that's where the search warrant has to come in, right? It's like, and I'm not sure Instagram keeps that either. Is when
Mhm.
you first added somebody. I don't think that's a data artifact, but um, I don't think so. I've never
Gotcha.
seen it where they actually have the date it followed. They can tell you who you're following. They can tell who's following you. Like, I don't think date matters to them.
Did you see it was a one-way follow? In your opinion, was it a one-way
I
follow or
can't
just
tell. Like, you can't tell from the data. You just know that well, I can tell you he's following her. I knew that.
okay?
That it did tell me. It didn't
Okay,
tell me her following him because I actually didn't run her report. If I would have ran it from her end, I could have seen it the other way around.
got you.
But
And
at the time, I ran this while I'm literally on the phone with the defense team before they was even hiring. They didn't know what they were doing in the defense team. They had no idea what to do with the case, right? They were just interviewing people, and just my guess is they're interviewing a ton of people. And I told them, "Hey, I saw the report. I think it's nonsense." And that was about the end of the conversation. I said, we can definitely help you out if you need help. But then I says, we're also super busy. So this is not going to happen anytime soon. And we parted ways. Right. So it was one of those conversations. But why I was on the phone was when I ran this. So
yeah,
this was it wasn't designed like to me actually used in our investigation. It was more of, let me see what's going on here. I heard that people said that they're unrelated and it's completely random. Let me run them in Shadow Dragon and see what I find.
yeah. And what does this mean? The ranked by outgoing links, ranked by total links. Like, is this like profiles that he clicked more often?
No, that would be like, so go back up. It's not how many times you clicked, it's how many people are connected. So
Mm,
that means 13 people have incoming links to him on Twitter. In other words, like they would have posted and tagged him on something,
okay.
at Bryan Kohberger, tag him in it. So the
Yeah.
incoming.
Interesting. Yeah, I looked up the first one, the I am Cookie Tea, and on Instagram, and there was a YouTube page associated with it. When I clicked on the YouTube page, interestingly enough, one of her first videos about 3 years ago is her arm sliced open. And I was like, that's an interesting thing to be looking at based on what he's accused of doing. And so, yeah, that was the first thing that I looked at when I went. And that's the first person that's the only one I went through. Some of these don't. Well, I mean, I'm lying. I went through some of the other ones, but I couldn't find them. But that was the only one I could find. So interesting enough. A lot of people are asking, and I've had this question myself as well. Could you tell or see if he was related to the Instagram or the Facebook profile Pappa Rodgers?
I don't know. I don't. It doesn't ring a bell to me. But I probably only looked at this for maybe an hour in my entire life. So, um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
is it in there? Is it in the sheet? Did you search for it?
It's not in here. This is all Instagram stuff that I saw.
Okay.
I didn't see anything here that said Pappa Rodgers on Instagram.
I may have not. So each time you get link to a social media account, say Instagram, I can
Yeah.
right mouse click and say footprint out Instagram, like show me everything. I probably didn't do that for Facebook yet.
Okay.
once I found these two were related, I knew it was like, okay, well, they've got some relationship in some way. Either he's following her, she's following him, or they know each other, right? That's what I was looking at.
Gotcha. And like you mentioned, all this, to your knowledge, has been sent over to law enforcement, and they have this as well.
I've been told a couple times now that it ended up being brought up in the case, like in court somehow. And I was like, what's really interesting is nobody's called me about it from law enforcement. Nobody's called me about it from the defense side. I think, due diligence is they should have done their own research and their own homework. They can't just rely on me and mine.
Yeah.
And especially just an automated tool, because I can't stand behind the validity of any of it. Although there's some now, the stuff that stands out to me, like All Trails user right there. I mean, All Trails tracks where you're hiking, right? That
Right.
should definitely be explored. Those are things I would have just drilled down into and explored even further.
Yeah, I definitely would have as well. Let's see. I'm gonna pull up a few questions if you don't mind. I know we're gone over an hour here, so I don't want to be disrespectful of your time. Knowing the info about the science CAST uses, how much trust should be placed in their data relative to the Kohberger case?
Well, we have to look at it. So we know that there's a phone. We know a phone call or text message or data is being used, and we know the location of that cell tower. So if somebody says, okay, he was on the southwest side of city versus northeast side of the city, I'm not going to argue there. That's accurate, right?
Right.
And depending on, and there's other factors to take into play, but in general sense, yes, you could tell somebody drove from the northeast side all the way down to the southwest side and somehow, or was on an airplane and flew overhead. When you see the data change really quick, sometimes they're in an airplane, but think about it. Cell towers are tilted down. You can only be so high before you're out of coverage,
Right.
because of downward tilt, you can't be at the horizon and expect to get cell coverage. As we all know, we've taken off from the plane and we're still trying to send a text, and all of a sudden, bam, no cell service. And we're like, damn it. And you got to wait. And then you're just waiting until you hit that, 3,600 feet and you got coverage again, and you're like jumping in. So the whole idea is this. What we don't know is the actual footprint of the cell tower. That's where they need to go out, drive test with engineering equipment, and make that determination. And it is going to look nothing like triangles. If triangles are still being used in the case, throw that crap out, go drive test. It's not that hard. If so, hire a place to do it. It's what, $3,000 to pay somebody to go drive test? Go drive test, get it done. I mean, most of our clients pay right around, like, we'll fly halfway across the United States, drive test, and write a report for under $6,000. That's not bad. And that's an engineer in the field, plane tickets, hotel, rental car, equipment on top, and taking engineering measurements and write an entire report for under $6,000. That's a worthwhile investment for them. That is a rounding error to the rest of their forensic equipment.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. And it's not that much either, especially for the amount of money that's been put into this case. $6,000 for something like that. That's important. Shouldn't be looked at. David says, so is the FBI CAST data they have now correct? Well, I'll expand on that question and ask it this way. When Nick Balance testifies in trial, the defense has Cyray. He knows some secrets. How do you anticipate that testimony going for the prosecution?
I think if the defense team took my cross-examination of the cell tower cop course, they would be taking them apart piece by piece. I mean, the simple questions to ask are real simple. And let me cover another concept here. I think that'll help you know what kind of nonsense this is. This is an absolute easy thing. When I drive by your house, Dan, you hear the bass going boom, 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 but you don't hear the hi-hats as tweeters, right? From car stereos. There's a reason why. Low frequencies have really big waveforms and they travel really far. High frequencies have little waveforms and they die.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I take your iPhone, and I'm guessing you got an iPhone. If you got an Android, I apologize. I know I'm probably being derogatory, but Android sucks. But security-wise. But if I take your iPhone and turn it over the box, the back side of the box, I think I got one. Here we go. Yep. The back side of these boxes and the sheet that comes inside these things have bands on it, okay? And what it says is this phone works on 3 bands. Let's say it's 3,200 megahertz, 2,300 megahertz, and 700 megahertz. Well,
Okay.
700 megahertz, 3200, and let's say 2300. And I got this. Let's change it. 3200, right? Okay. If you're in a cell tower, it's 700 megahertz. Your cell coverage 360 would be that big. If you're at 3200 megahertz, you would be this big. If you're 2300, you'd be this big.
Okay.
So if they're taking a wedge like that, if they don't even know what band they're operating on, which, by the way, the call detail records have the bands on it, but the government deletes it out. They delete that column of data in every single case I've ever worked in, the data that shows the band, because the band determines the distance you could be from a cell tower. The lower the frequency, the further away you could be, the higher frequency you're closer. Now, this is why that makes it's very, very important in cellular engineering. And let me explain to you why. It's called frequency reuse. Back in the day, if you had two cell towers, they would be like this, right? And you would just draw between it because it's 2G days, right? The crap doesn't exist anymore. It's a long gone, right? 3G's even gone. We're down to 4G. The way it works is you got one cell tower that's here, you got another one that's maybe here, and you got another one that's here, and then you got a little one that's here. They're different sizes because this one's at 700 megahertz. That one can't be 700. It'll conflict. It's the same frequency. You'll get collision all the time and tons of interference. So this one would be 3200. This one would be 2300. And then it'll go back 700. It's called frequency reuse.
Okay.
They have to know what frequency the call was carried on, what band. We call it band, which is a frequency. Because if you're on 700 megahertz, you could be really far away. If you're on this would be like 3200 megahertz again, and let's say another 700 out here. If you're on a 3200 megahertz, you're really close. You may be 1.2 miles from the tower. In this case, you could be 28 miles from the tower.
Right.
They leave all that data off.
Huh.
That's because they're not doing it right. And that's a very easy concept to understand for a jury, is to know that the base low frequency travels really far. I can hear it through my house, travels through vegetation, buildings, trees, and goes really, really far. High frequencies die really quickly. Depending on what frequency you're operating on, changes the distance you could be from the cell tower. And they take zero of that into consideration, and that has to be taken into consideration each and every single time you draw out a cell network. So what I think the government's doing is they're discounting 95% of the science and losing accuracy in doing so for the sake of making things simple, and also to sell the jury on an idea that it's GPS. It's not GPS.
Yeah. So, and this transitions to Mike's question here. How did they come up with the 100-meter radius then? How do they use that? And I don't think they explain that, but I'm sure the government can track you. They found Riley Strain via his phone, pinpointed his location. But how do they come up with? And he uses a different scenario how they were able to use somebody's phone and pinpoint their location. But how did they come up with the 100-meter circle?
If you have 911, when you make a phone call to 911, they will fire up a whole different system than what we're talking about, and it will send a MAC control traffic to your phone from 3 cell towers. Then it's doing timing advance, and it's measuring you from 3 different ways. That's how 911 works. So you can definitely get a location of somebody via 911. Now 911, even at its best, is only 71% accurate. That's published rates in the 911 system. So that's why the 911 callers go, we got an ambulance en route. Can you tell me the color of your house? Can you tell me this? Can you tell me that? And they're relaying that because if they knew exactly where you're at, they wouldn't need to ask any of that.
True.
So you can listen to any 911 call. They ask all those questions because they know that 911 system is going to get them close, but it's not going to get them right to the exact location. Now, if you got direct line of sight to 3 cell phone towers and it's a clear day and it's great, guess what? You may get dead on. But without that, you may be way off. So that's why they ask questions. So it depends on the technology they're using. If they're using timing advance, like we talked about earlier, to measure the distance from a cell tower, and then they say, well, it's a 100-meter ring. What they're saying is our timing advance says you're 1,000 meters out from the cell tower. Okay, range. But they didn't say you didn't bounce off something. But if you were just to draw a straight line in your middle of the cornfields, and you're like, hey, I got direct line of sight, 1,000 meters out, Okay, I'll give it. You're somewhere in the arc of 1,000 meters. Then they're saying because of the frequency band you're on, okay, that it has an error ratio of 100 meters. So that's why they put the circle of 100 meters. And here's why. Nobody wants to be embarrassed with somebody that has a photo selfie taken here and they say I'm 100 meters over.
Yeah.
You better just put a fudge factor of 100 meters and call it a day because hey, most likely you're within these 100 meters. That's what they're saying. So that's why you see that. So you ever get on Google and it shows a big ring and goes, doo, 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 comes down? That's what it does. Has two antennas in outer space and it gets 3, 4, 5, 7, and your precision gets better as you get more measurements from more cell antenna. I mean, more measurements from more antennas in outer space.
Right, but in Bryan Kohberger's case, it doesn't sound like they have his advanced timing records. You can't use any of those things so it's going to be interesting.
They may not. They may have them and not use them. I mean, I get that all the time. They go, well, we have stuff. We don't have to use it in the prosecution. We can just withhold it. But if it's exculpatory, we should get it.
Right.
Because it may exonerate the client. But oftentimes, no, that's not the case. I mean, this just happened in Chicago. Forgot the name of the case. But a guy just spent the last 14, 15 years in prison, and they hid the timing advance records. And the timing advance records, actually, the government's own cast agent said it exonerated the client 14 years ago, and they still hid it from coming up in court. And then it came out now when they were moving evidence around. Somebody found it, and they turned him in. And now they got this huge investigation going on because they hid the data. And the data, the timing advance records there showed he wasn't even anywhere near the crime scene. He was like 14 miles away. And in that case, you don't need timing advance data. I can tell you right now, the cell tower 14 miles away near Chicago is not going to be the tower that you could use from 14 miles away, right? It's just not, can't use a tower 14 miles away in a very dense area like that. It's just not possible. There's going to be, and you do not get handed off to the next tower as you're driving. This whole idea of when you're driving, when you get 70% of the distance between two towers, you get handed off. Yeah, in 2G's days in 1980, you get that, but not now. You're sticky on a tower. It's called cell hysteresis. So you stay sticky on this tower because think about it. Your phone's already broadcasted at a certain power. The cell tower is broadcasting at a certain tower. Why in the world would it ever have you connect to another cell site if it could keep communicating with you and you got good communication? It's a complete waste to switch you to another tower. Instead, they wait till your signal gets horrible, and then your phone tries to find a new tower to handoff candidate, is what we call it. You may have passed 30 cell towers. And let me give you an idea. Like, I live in Orlando, Florida, East Orlando, not near crazy Disney. But in Orlando, we have 29,000 cell towers. In Memphis, Tennessee, there's 23,144 cell towers just in the city. They're strapped to the side of Starbucks, on top of big buildings, boomer sites that cover big, large areas. They're all over the place. So this idea that you connected to one tower and drove 7 miles through a city and got hand off the next tower, and they go, well, that's the tower you get hand off to because you went 70% of the distance between that and the next tower you get handed off. Remember when we talked about the size? What if one cell tower is really big and one's small? That your 70% rule dies.
Yeah. There's a lot of variables.
It's bad science is what it is. It was designed to teach a beat cop to be a cell engineer in 48 hours.
Jeez.
They just don't know. I have their training book. Their 2 day. Well, here, let me show it to you. You want to see you want to see what they actually get trained to do? Yeah. Now, you're the first person in history outside of law enforcement to ever see this besides me. So
all right.
This is it. Nobody's ever published it. Nobody's talked about it. They won't. They deny it exists. It's let's go here. So here's the student workbook for the 2-day school. And I'm not going to show it all, but I'll show you a part of it. Let's go here. Let's go. Here we go. Basic historical cell site analysis. Now I want you to take a look at this. Basic cellular theory. The rest of it is how to plot dots on a map. That's it. You can see here's the front book. Right here is let me show you how much instruction they have on it. Right here. That's cell phone theory. That's it. 15 minutes. 15 minutes of training, and these people are now experts on the witness stand. And the rest of all this has to do with how to plot dots on a map using a program like
Right.
Sci-Rays.
Right. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no even understanding of the concepts. They're taught how to testify, how to dodge the questions, and not understand any of the science behind any of it. They're taught how to plot dots on a map and call it a day. And they go, that's the cell coverage because I was taught that. And somebody told me that. And I go, that's great. The world's not flat, it's round. But they don't want to hear it.
Well, I'm glad that there's a lot more evidence that they require for an arrest and for conviction outside of this, because it is it's definitely eye-opening, to be honest with you. You know how inaccurate some of this stuff can be on, and this goes for both sides, prosecution and the defense in this case here, that are trying to use this. Like I said, fortunately, there's a lot more evidence than just the phone evidence that puts Bryan Kohberger, or that for reasons why they arrested Bryan Kohberger. You know, a couple more questions, and then I'll let you go. I know we're getting a little bit long, but Trina asks about the Shadow Dragon stuff and about the websites. Is there a way to get his IP address from any of this stuff where he was at when he got online, or anything like social media
Not
stuff?
without a warrant. That's a warrant or subpoena, and the subpoena ain't gonna work. I mean, if the family filed a civil case, I guess we could make a extraordinary argument that the IP address is relevant. And in doing so, and I have they filed a civil case yet? I don't know if they did. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
If they do, then there's a thing called the Stored Communications Act that would prohibit the cell carriers or social media providers from providing you like the IP address. But there's end runs around that. There's a way to get around it, and it isn't some trick. The law says the parties can't ask for that stuff. So you remove yourself and have the court issue a subpoena, return service to the court. So it's in a court inquiry. So therefore, It doesn't violate the SCA. And we've done that in cases before, like let's say there's a car wreck, and for instance, I had a semi, 3 kids dead, back seat, side of the road. Mom's passed out. She's in a coma for 2 months. No witnesses per se, and we basically tell Google we need this data right around this, and they said SCA, Stored Communications Act, can't give it to us. We had the judge issue the subpoena return service to the court only, so he's not disclosing it to the parties yet. If he discloses it, that's on the judge, not Google. They can't be held liable then. And then he gave it to us. We found 145 people that have driven through that area. We ran down the 145, found about 35 semis. After doing that, we ended up identifying the people that had driven by. We called all of them, and one girl says, yeah, I called the 800 number in the back of the semi. The guy had an alcohol bottle in his hand, was completely drunk, driving all over the road, and he smashed into the car. I also called the police, and they took a police report, but they never called me back. And she had the phone call still, and she found the 800 number, found the trucking company, found the truck, and pinned the tail on the donkey, right?
Oh,
It's
wow.
just doing the investigative work, right? In that case, yes, they gave us IP addresses, everything, but SCA usually prohibits people from getting that, but the government can get it with a warrant, right? That's what they have warrants for.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're friendly. These social media companies, do not think for a minute they're not friendly with law enforcement. They literally have their own law enforcement relations group. They have people that testify for them. They can call 24 hours a day, get answers to whatever they want to get answers to. They have the National Domestic Communications Assistance Center that helps law enforcement. It's an FBI unit, helps law enforcement get this data. There's law enforcement awards ceremonies every year where you have all the social media companies up there with guns and badges on their sides because they've deputized some of them.
Yeah.
And their legal compliance officers are up there getting awards from law enforcement. It's a big club.
Yeah.
Don't think for a minute they can't get that data. They can get whatever they ask for. The problem is a lot of times they get the data. They actually don't put it in the case. They keep it in a separate file because it doesn't look good for them, or they came back and there's just no useful data out of it.
Understood. Now, Bryan Kohberger, he wrote in his essay that he was wanted to be some sort of expert in forensic cloud-based data and things of that nature. Is there anything screwy that he could have done to his phone that could have made maybe the locations inaccurate and or deleted some of these connections that could have been found on Shadow Dragon?
The social media data, no, you can't really do anything because they keep that outside the phone. That's kept up in the cloud. As far as the phone, I mean, people that wipe their data out, if you just dump your phone like full reset, it's gone unless they get the iCloud backup, right? If it's Android, it's gone for good. You can get iCloud backup, you can get the data. As far as like messing with your GPS, yes, there's plenty of applications that can like obfuscate your GPS and put you somewhere where you're not. And that happens. Lots of people use those because people move out of state when they're supposed to be, let's say you're from Ohio and you take a job in Ohio and they let you work from home. But you move to Florida. A lot of them use VPNs or IP maskers or GPS stuff when they're logging into work. And then eventually their employer finds out they're in Florida, causes major problems because they're paying the wrong state payroll tax. So there's lots of apps that do that for you that you can obfuscate that stuff for various reasons, like employment reasons, stuff like that. Plus also you're faking GPS. And it's very hard to tell the difference. Once the app is installed that does that, because it intercepts the GPS coordinate that's given from outer space. The error correction happens and you get a coordinate. It'll replace that coordinate with something else. So your phone actually thinks it's somewhere it's not. And if you've ever turned your phone on and not had GPS on and it brings it down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? That's the center. I would hate to be an advertiser in Tulsa because everybody's searching for pizza is calling your store in Tulsa because Google just made that like the center of the world to them. And they turn on GPS and it corrects you and you're in Orlando, Florida, right? But that causes a major problem in Tulsa. But that's one of the things. It would say you're in Tulsa. If you took a photo as soon as you turn your phone on and it pinned you in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it would GPS locate in Tulsa.
Interesting.
That's why anytime we get a case and there's a bunch of data in Tulsa, we just kind of ignore it. We know that that's not real. That's just Google doing that.
So you mentioned that if somebody's wiping out their phones, if come to find out, and I think this might be the case, I joke around and tell people that I'm psychic when I know certain things. One of the things that I know is that apparently he was wiping his phone quite a bit, resetting it. Does that tell you something? Does that tell you that he's trying to mask something, especially now that we know throughout the documentation, they say 23 times there that he was there. You think he was trying to hide that?
Depends. I mean, he was doing research, right? He's a researcher. Yeah. It could be he's just testing something, right? And did he have Android?
I think he had an Android.
I
could be wrong, but I think he had an Android.
I think if I remember right, it was Android. But it's been a while. But I could see him wiping out an Android phone all the time. I mean, testing apps and doing stuff, sure. Why not? Right? But we're in a forensic lab. We have stacks of phones we use for testing. Like we got buckets full of phones, right? Different makes and models and stuff we do testing on. We probably wipe 5 phones a day in testing.
Yeah.
But that's us. We're a lab, right? But I know lots of people wipe their phone quite often because they got a backup. They could just refresh it back to where it was at. Right. But if you're really trying to evade stuff, you wouldn't be on social media. You wouldn't be, because these, you're being tracked. Like if you think for a minute you're ever going to use a cell phone and you're not being tracked by the government, it's just nonsense. Right? The only difference is there, and I could imagine being a law enforcement officer knowing that you have all this data from the cell phone company and they're tracking it. And if you were the DOD, they just give it to you, right? Because they call it terrorism and just give it to you, right?
Yeah.
But you're sitting there thinking, I have all this, but I can't use it because if I do, Congress is going to shut us all down and tell us we've been spying on Americans, right? And instead, they dribble a little out here to get their results in the case without busting the model of keep all this data secret. There is data sets like MDT data. It's dead on accurate. There's companies like Better World Analytics that do that type of work. Gladiator Forensics works with some of that stuff, with some of the location data. So that data exists. They just can't use it because it's prohibited from being used like that because they're not supposed to have it to begin with.
Right.
But there's cell companies, if you take a look at OnStar got caught selling it, so they got caught. So I had a bunch of cases recently where they had chiming advance data, but it was stored in OnStar. OnStar kept track of it, and we wanted it. And OnStar says, you're never going to get it. They came to court, doubled down, and then they filed a motion to have the plaintiff like pay $30,000 in legal fees to make OnStar show up. And I mic dropped him in 5 seconds. I said, OnStar, you can't say that it's exempt underneath the Stored Communications Act when you're selling it through brokers. And here's the FTC ruling saying you're selling it. And the judge goes, I agree. You're giving it all to them. And they had to deliver it all in a single day, but they tried to hide it before then. There's this cat and mouse game. It's always being played of, you got something in the closet, but you don't want anybody to look inside, because if they do, you may not have a closet anymore. Congress or government may take it away from you. It's kind of like I always say it's kind of like Elvis Chan and those guys out in Southern California. They're sending emails to Twitter saying, hey, can you just build us a back door into the fire hose? Like, it's no big deal. A casual conversation, just to build the FBI a back door to look at everybody's internal messages on Twitter. Like, it's no big deal, right?
Yeah.
It only takes, but here's the deal. So that stuff happens all the time. The problem is they can't admit to it. So they may very well have the data they're looking for. They just can't say that they do.
Interesting.
Who knows?
Yeah.
And it may exonerate them. I don't know that. It may not work out well for them. I know Cy Ray's onto something with their secrets, right? He's like, hey, guys, there are groups within these providers that have, and here's what happens. You get a law enforcement person that stands on the top of the hill with their fists in there, let's take down every criminal, and they throw everything they have at it. And then they leave law enforcement and they don't have a purpose in life anymore, right? They're like, I'm not a law enforcement officer anymore. So they sit around for about a year stewing, right? And then after a year, they call companies like mine, hey, I want to talk about getting a job. And they never pass. 99% of them don't pass the interview because they have so much bias. I'm like, I can't employ you. You need to come in this with a level head. Our job is to educate and analyze. We don't sell a story one way or the other. We don't tell you you're guilty or you're innocent. We tell you what the facts are. Jury decides guilt or innocent, not us. Well, they come in, they're all guilty. They're all guilty, and you're like, interview's over. Right. But you get people that do the law enforcement thing for a while, and then eventually they say, well, I need income, right? I don't have a job. And there's not an employer that's going to pay me to shoot a gun anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Security guards don't make that much money. And executive protection detail, well, who the hell wants to do that? You travel with some privileged person around the world, right? So they figure out they got to do something. So they go do stuff. They're like, okay, I'll take a few defense cases a year and dribble out the government's secrets at high cost.
Yeah. I mean, when he said something to the, when Cy Ray said something to the effect that he had a meeting with an FBI agent, and this FBI agent had told him this and that, but he didn't want to say who he was, not yet, but can. That's the first thing that I thought. I was like, oh, so this guy's burning his bridges with law enforcement and trying to throw out a bunch of secrets out there that he may or may not have. Probably tells me that he's probably has no intention on working with law enforcement anymore, for one, and two, is trying to get his name out there as a possible person that would work with defense attorneys. So I mean, that was kind of like all right. I mean, that's kind of where that's going. But when I listen to what he says, 7 minutes, and they're saying that he's facing the wrong direction. The murders happened over an hour after that. And he could just easily have turned around. Plus, also, I'd found another street going off the roadway where his phone turned off that would have put him right back in front of Floyd Cannabis Shop right in time. And there's no cameras there until you get there. So I'm just glad that there's much more evidence than this.
There's, I always say is you have to look at the totality of evidence. You can't look at one thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I get brought into cases that become punitive in a way. And I say that's not my fault. If you're going to spin it on the other side and the jury finds a person not guilty when they're dead guilty, right? There's like, I've had cases where there's literally 17 witnesses and a video of the person shooting somebody. I mean, it's clear as day. Like, there's no question. But they come in and throw all the cell evidence out and all this stuff like this. The defense is still going to put on the case that the cell evidence needs to be thrown out and is incorrect, because it is. And they'll take it piece by piece. Now, the reason they do that is they need to preserve an appellate record, right? So if on appeal, if something happens, let's say if you got 5 things and 4 out of the 5 get thrown out and the one thing left, that's the only thing you have to appeal because the jury made a decision based on the one thing, not 5 things. It makes things less complicated. Now, there's been times where you testify about the cell evidence stuff and the jury finds a person not guilty, and their response when polled afterwards was, if the FBI or the state police or local law enforcement can lie about that one thing, I don't trust them on anything else they did.
It's true.
It's punitive. It's punitive on purpose because you take the super innocent and the super guilty and you take a battle in between, and the in between is where the court lies to either write new law or have a good battle over science and technology and blood and DNA and our interpretation of that. And that's where experts come in, and there's got to be a lot of respect for both sides. You got to understand everybody doesn't come from the same place. And there's times you're going to go to court and it's going to be a CNA versus a brain surgeon, right? And it's not going to match up. But what we cannot have is the government saying, we have super secret methods and methodologies. We won't tell you what they are, but jury, just believe us. We're correct, right? And that's why you see these battles. That's why you see Cy Ray in here saying, hey, look, these guys don't get to come to court and bamboozle everybody with some nice, pretty maps of triangles on it. You need to prove up science. It's like bite mark evidence. How many years was that used? And now it's thrown out as a debunked science. Or if you look at Cybercheck is a company that was used to put 600 people in prison last year. And now the person fled the country that owns the company. They got found to completely fabricate all of it. The judge made them turn the source code over to what they were doing. 150 lines of source code. It went out to AI and just fabricated an entire history for somebody. It says that they had criminal indicators of compromise, and they knew whether your defendant drove by a Casey's gas station because the gas pump could detect your phone driving by. There's no technology in the world that could do something like that, right? Your phone doesn't emit a signal to a gas pump that says, hey, I'm here, and identify you at the same time. They literally took whatever the law enforcement sent them, regurgitated it into AI, and spit it out as if it's gospel truth. And they says, look, we've got all this information. They tie it in with some background check information, and they quit testifying. Matter of fact, they got put underneath criminal investigation for it. But it's okay. Law enforcement used it to put 600 people in jail. So now every case is up for review. Got to prove up science. You want to come to court? Bring the science. Bring the textbooks. Bring the peer-reviewed white papers. And don't hang your hat on one salient sentence somewhere. You need to be able to prove it up. Come with the facts. Come with the math. And we'll have a good battle in court to see who's right and who's wrong. Unfortunately, we don't see that in our court system. We have judges that are still using pen and paper that don't use a computer. You have prosecutors that have no idea what's going on. And you have law enforcement that has made up their own science and their own methodologies that's unsupported. There is a $400 billion industry. The cell industry is massive. They have engineers, field testers, performance, quality assurance, coders and software and everything. They all want to get it right. And then the government builds their own methodologies that these people don't even support. It's just nonsense. Like, why would you build your own? Just call the cell company and say, hey, what method do you use to locate a phone? Let's use that one.
Yeah.
Nope. They've created their own science. And you know what so there's a nice transcript. It's Pennsylvania versus Taquan Atkinson. And the head of the FBI cast testifies. His name's William Shute. Well, he was the head back then. But he was the first national cast asset. And they says, who made this science up? He said, I did. He says, what scientific basis do you have? He goes, I don't have one. He says, it just works. We find missing people. And if you listen to the testimony every time, is we find terrorists, we find missing people, we find missing kids, we save the world. That is the validity behind it. It's saying if that's positive proof that the science is good. That is not positive proof the science is good. If I go to Vegas and put a quarter in 100 times, if I hit the jackpot once, or even if I get $5 return, that is not positive proof that you're going to win with your money in Vegas.
It's true.
You're going to be right eventually one time. And all they do is conflate things together and say, this is good science because we got an arrest. That is not a measurement for good science. That's why there's no engineers testifying about this stuff. You look at all the transcripts, nobody's testifying. They're not engineers. And that's why we hired engineers.
It's crazy, man. I'm dumbfounded as to why it hasn't been, updated. But then again, I mean, with the court system, everything is just so slow because you have a lot of people that don't want to change. They don't want to change from what they're used to.
I say this, Bryan Kohberger could be dead guilty. but they need to have the science to do so, because they're going to, if they have the right defense team put together, they're going to bloody the prosecution in court when it comes to cell evidence. They're
Right.
going to walk out with no knees. They need
Mm.
to absolutely get their crap together. And they need to quit talking to the people that don't know the difference. Call the cell carrier and get an engineer to show up. That's all they got
So
to do.
you think there's
They
still
won't do
time
it.
to fix all this before trial?
Sure, absolutely. Or you could dismiss the case and refile it the next day. I mean, they have 1,000 options here.
Yeah,
They
that's
just
true.
don't. Look, take the arrogance out. Take the fact that you say you went to a 2-day school and got trained. You know, and you talk about the tools like CastViz that they're using and tools like that. I have that. I'm the only firm in the United States that has that was given it to me in discovery. And I have it. We've reverse engineered it, and it has major flaws inside the software. And if the FBI hears your podcast, wants to talk about it, they give me a call. We'll talk about it. I'll show them how they got things completely backwards in the application, and it misapplies some concepts in there, and they just run with whatever pukes out of that system. It's going to get them in a lot of trouble. And what I don't want to do is, look, if you're innocent, you're innocent. If you're guilty, you're guilty. What I want is everybody to get the science right.
Yeah, exactly. That's
And
what's
they
important.
clearly, you've got a battle waging between the government, who I think has the science completely incorrect, and you got Cy Ray that's saying, "I got your secrets. Play games." We'll Cy Ray, when he comes to court for the trial, that's when everything will come out,
Mhm.
and that's what they should be afraid of. And they need to get some real engineers in there to testify about this, because it's gonna hurt them, and they're gonna get hurt bad, and it may even be punitive, and it may be a complete embarrassment. It may
Right.
consider it fraud upon the court. Get it right. Do it once. That's all you got to do.
Exactly. And I can guarantee you this will get to the right persons. I can guarantee that. Well,
We'll see what
and
happens.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Garrett, Andy, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
No,
You've
hey,
been so informative. Like, there's so much I didn't even know myself. I'll be honest with you. I myself ex-law enforcement, but I never did any of this stuff with the cell phone stuff. Never once, never touched it, never looked at it. Don't know anything about it. So I'm glad I could bring you on that could explain it to us.
hey, I love law enforcement. They do a great job. I have family, friends, everything that's law enforcement. Matter of fact, I have a 20-year law enforcement officer I just hired. He'll be here next week. I do. I just think that there's certain areas that a typical law enforcement officer is all of a sudden is playing engineer. That gets very difficult. It's kind of like, I equate it to this. It's kind of like taking an E4 in the military and putting them in a forensic laboratory and expect them to be a forensic DNA expert, right? They need to go to a lot more schooling. I see
Yeah.
somebody asked about Gladiator.
Gladiator app. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, so Gladiator Forensics used to be Gladiator Innovations. Innovations was owned by some people, and one of those people happens to be my new business partner in another venture. So I know a lot about Gladiator. And Gladiator is down in Melbourne, Florida. They are located by Florida Institute of Technology. They do the drive testing, and they process the data for the FBI's drive tests. That's what Gladiator does. They also have their own drive test equipment, which is just another company's equipment branded their name, and it tests 10 active cell antennas at the time. It'll test to like 10 different carriers at the same time, so they can drive test once instead of a bunch of times. Well, now there's equipment that does the same thing. One is PCTEL G-Flex, does the same thing as their system. It'll test every cell operator, every carrier, every frequency all at the same time at 10,000 measurements a second. It's fast. That's what we use here. We use something that, my understanding is, now the FBI has been in negotiations sourcing the same equipment we already own, the new version. So they're going to hopefully catch up to where we're at right now. But so Gladiator, that's what they do. Chuck and those guys down at Gladiator, they have a tool called ESPA, which basically does propagation modeling. If you saw that picture I showed you earlier, it shows a scatter plot of just, random RF all over the place in the hillside. I believe that was created by Gladiator. Just a software tool, and then post-processing, and then consultant work for the FBI.
Yeah.
They all work with the FBI every day.
Good deal. Good deal. So that's not something uncommon then, I guess, because I know that Nick Valance, it was mentioned by Ann Taylor that Nick Valance worked with Gladiator and to do some of the test drive with Bryan Kohberger's case.
Well, yeah, I mean, they'll either go out and drive test themselves, or these guys go out and drive test with Gladiator equipment and they ship it back. The FBI doesn't have a ton of their equipment. They have these things staged throughout the United States, so they kind of borrow it for a weekend drive and then ship it back because they're expensive. I
Yeah.
mean, this stuff is, it's $500,000, right? It's
Ooh.
my understanding. Yeah, it's expensive, and so is PC Tel's equipment. But the equipment we use is the same exact equipment 320 mobile network operators use in the United States. That's
Yeah.
all of them, 100%. And it's also the same equipment used to certify the network on the 911 system. So there's no argument in the use of the equipment. It's all certified by the FCC, licensed to do exactly what it does. Differences between ours and Gladiator, not much. Does the same thing. One's
Yeah.
faster than the other, but that's about it. Same type of data.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, it's good to know that. And thank you so much again, Andrew.
Thank you.
Maybe when this is all said and done, the trial is over and we got a good understanding, maybe I can bring you back on to explain what actually happened.
Yeah, well, it'll be fun because I think I may actually have to watch this trial. I usually don't, like, we're working on, if you want to know something parallel, YNW Melly, the rapper, I'm working on his case. That case is the FBI impeached the state impeached the FBI over cell evidence. This is a crap show, right? And
Really?
that could very well be what's going to happen in this case if they don't get it together. So they really need to step back and say, hey, let's pull some people in here. And it's not the people that have their name on stuff and the name and the glitter in the sky, right? They
Yeah.
need to call cell engineers, not people that went to the 2-week school. Call an actual cell engineer and have a conversation with them, and you'll find out. And the type of engineer they really should contact is called a performance engineer. That is a very specific type of cell engineer, and that's exactly who they have to call. That's who knows the difference between all this stuff, right? So I
Yes, sir.
appreciate you having me on, Dan. It's been great. I love talking about this stuff. I love teaching. That's my passion. So this is an opportunity to get away from the laboratory over there and actually talk about some cool, fun stuff and how it really applies in court. Because I love when people get it right. Right? It's like beautiful trials when you get it right, messy when you don't. And
Yeah, exactly.
we don't want injustice, right? And plus, also, you don't want appeals, right? Let's say he is guilty. You don't want him appealing over this. You want it right the first time, right? Instead,
Exactly.
you don't want trial twice. I mean, take a look at Karen Reed trial. What's going on
Oh,
right now? Same thing. Like, just, and I have friends that worked on that, right? Everybody that's been doing this like as long as I have, we all know each other. We're all friends with each other. Never think that we're on the opposite side of the fence of each other. We're not. Even in law enforcement, I literally call up law enforcement every week. I'm like, hey, you guys dealt with this over here. What about this? What about this? And they think like nobody would ever talk to us because we do defense work. No, it isn't like that. We're all professionals in the field. Some people are not. It's okay. They cannot be professionals. They can have their biases and they do whatever. It'll all work itself out in court. But the rest of us, we all kind of get along, right?
yeah.
We all share information, but we won't share information about the case we're working on.
Exactly.
No, that doesn't happen. So, well, hey, I wish them all luck. I wish the family luck. I know they're this is a horrible, horrible thing to go through. I watch families that deal with this every day. I can't even imagine what it's like, and nobody could. And it's just a horrible, horrible thing. And we all want justice. If it ends up being Bryan Kohberger who did it, hey, let justice be served. That's all I have to say, right?
Yes, sir.
If it
Yes,
ends up
sir.
not being, you don't want somebody wrongfully convicted either. You want to find the right person. I mean, we
Exactly.
worked on that Melissa Kalazinski case. Look at that. We actually got the coroner's computer, forensically analyzed it, and they testified there's a hole in the head. They could stick their finger through it. Two coroners did. I got the actual real X-rays, not a hole in the head at all, not even a fracture. They are
Ooh.
now, I mean, now they got a post-conviction appeal. Even the prosecutor's like, Andrew, your work was phenomenal. I'm getting her out of jail. He said, I'm going to do everything possible to get this girl out of jail. The former state's attorney is absolutely guilty of committing fraud upon the court. That data is not correct. They falsified all the records and they got caught. And we did a whole entire 48-hour special on that. And she should be out, and I hope she gets out soon. And that happens, right? We just don't want that to happen, because now who did it, right? Who
Yeah.
really did it? And was the kid really injured or not? That kind of stuff. So hopefully they get it right. That's all I want.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right.
Thanks, Dan. You have a great day, okay?
You too, buddy. Thank you so much, guys. That was Andrew Garrett from Garrett Discoveries, guys. excellent interview with him. Just kind of answer a few of your guys' questions and give you guys my thoughts and opinions on the video. You know, I caught his interview the first time with Forensic Frenzy, and I was aware that he was very skeptical about what the state was doing. And he was also very skeptical about what the defense was saying and what Cyray was saying and how that Cyray's information wasn't accurate. So I was fairly well aware of what his stance was on those things before bringing him on. You know, I don't know where the state is today as far as this case goes, as far as their cell phone activity, if they've changed some things or not. But I'm going to make sure that this gets to the right place, because this is something that I've been saying since that Forensic Frenzy interview with Andrew Garrett a few months back, maybe a year ago now. And I was like, hey, what he is saying is true, that there's some question here. But what he is saying is that this is also can be fixed. And this can be addressed in the meantime. And so hopefully this can get out to the right people, so that way they can do the right things to make sure that it is fixed, if it hasn't already been fixed. There's a good possibility that they saw that Forensic Frenzy interview a while ago and have addressed a lot of the things that he's mentioning now. And we just don't know about it yet. You know, as far as what Cyray was saying, Cyray, he's got a question mark about Bryan Kohberger. And the way they used their phone, and there was a 7-minute situation there where he the state said that he turned off his phone like at 2:47, and then it was actually 2:54 or something of that nature, right? However, in the document, the PCA, it mentions that one of the way they correlate Bryan Kohberger with that phone and that vehicle that's seen there without the front license plate is cameras. There's cameras on Nevada Street and things of that nature. And so, according to the PCA, it says that he turned off of the Nevada Street area towards SR 270, which leads to Pullman, and that this was around 2:53 in the morning. And so, reality, there's only 1 minute there of a question mark. Now, the defense says that he didn't turn on 270, that he continued in a different direction. And if you go through the maps, there's a street, Sunshine, I believe, that is further south at 270 that goes back into 270. There's no cameras, there's no nothing there. In fact, I've had a video, and we'll play that probably in the next maybe the next time we meet. No, tomorrow we're having Jennifer Coffindaffer, former retired FBI agent. Sorry about that. Former retired FBI agent, special agent Jennifer Coffindaffer on the show tomorrow. So probably Thursday, maybe we'll go through some of the videos. I had one of our excellent viewers and members actually drive it for us and videotape it for us. And so they'll be bringing that to us, and we'll be able to watch that. I've had it actually for quite some time. And just been waiting for a right moment to play it. And so, was he connected to social media? I think so. I think he was connected to social media. He followed them. According to Andrew Garrett, he was unsure if Bryan Kohberger was followed by the victims. He didn't know that, and he didn't know when the following happened. And so, Daniel, doesn't this make you feel? Doesn't this make you feel we should all wait to learn what evidence is real vice opinion? The last case Garrett mentioned is an example. Obviously, yes. You should always wait until you get all your evidence in. But in this case here, there's so much evidence against Bryan Kohberger. It's much more than the phone locations and the 23 times that he may have been there. It's the fact that his phone was off that night. And that's one of the things that Andrew Garrett mentioned, is that if the phone died, if the phone was out of service, or if the phone was turned off. We know that he physically turned it off. We know that he puts himself in his car, and we know that car didn't have a front license plate until November 18th. And so he puts himself in his white Elantra during the times of the murders, and that specific time with his phone off. And it's in this oddly houred specific time of night. Now, we also have video footage of a vehicle matching his down to the front license plate being missing in front of that area, in that area. Now, I know some folks are saying, oh, it could have been green, could have been yellow, could have been silver. You know what else comes out white on a black and white screen? White. So there's more to it, too, than just the fact that it was a white car without a front license, but you also have the DNA inside of the house. You have the purchases of the K-bar knife, the purchases of the K-bar knife sheath, the sharpener. The K-bar knife and the K-bar knife sheath can't be found. You also have purchased the balaclava mask, the Dickie suit with the tag and the receipt left in his apartment. I mean, you have the entire kill kit that he made redone. And as I mentioned before, this guy is a guy that claimed to have been or wanted to be some sort of expert in cloud forensics, and yet he was resetting his phone. And that was one of the things that Andrew Garrett brought up as a way to try to mask your locations and if what you were doing. And so when you add all those things together, it really does play a pretty picture, paint a pretty picture of what actually happened here. And maybe not a pretty picture, I shouldn't say that, a pretty ugly picture, but one that's pretty clear as far as being able to connect these dots. It's not a scenario where there's so many different things going on. And the other thing is too, like with the scenario that he mentioned with the forensic guy and the hole in the head and stuff like that. I'm not aware of that case. I'm sure it happens. Those things happen, but I don't know if there's any evidence of anything like that happening in Moscow. So you can't look at what happens in one specific area at one specific time, because time is important, right? What somebody can do to, I don't know, frame somebody today would be a lot harder to do, or a lot easier to do 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 15 years ago, 20 years ago. The further back in time you go, the much easier way that those things are possible and likely or possibility. I just think that it's kind of like the like 99% of the time something's going to go one way, and then that 1% of the time, because it so rarely does happen, it gets magnified and highlighted. And so the scenarios where somebody has been innocent or something like that, that they've been framed or maybe, I don't know if framing, especially nowadays, is that all that plausible. Now, I think mistakes, yes, very much so. I think that an officer can get some tunnel vision or whatever the case may be, and maybe not see certain things. But I don't think it's more like, all right, we're going to go plant some evidence and do this and that and the third, especially in this case. The DNA for Bryan Kohberger's DNA that's on the knife sheath, when was that found and located, right? For them to have planted that evidence, because the state lab was there right away. In fact, they're the ones that collected that evidence. They're the ones that found the DNA, and then they're ones that entered it into a national database called CODIS that is monitored and maintained by multiple law enforcement agencies across the nation. So, when would they have planted it? They would have had to have done it before it was collected. And when do they have time to do that? You start having to now think of, all right, well, now law enforcement committed this crime because they're the ones that planted the evidence. It makes zero sense. And if somebody's planting evidence, why are you planting skin cells on a button snap? You can plan a lot more different type of evidence than that. Hair, stuff like that you can maybe not easily grab, because this guy was doing a bunch of things to try to mitigate his DNA being left behind in places. He was wearing gloves. He was, doing things to his trash and stuff. But, it'd be a lot easier to collect skin cells and then transfer them without any contamination, without manipulating that DNA sample as small as it is too, without introducing your own DNA into it. It would be very difficult. It'd be very difficult. So as much as I say, wait, for those that want to wait for the entire case and the evidence to be thrown out there, yeah, for sure. I just think that there's a strong case here that says that Bryan Kohberger committed this crime. I assume that he was there 23 times or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if he was there more. But that's not the only thing that has Bryan Kohberger to this case. That's not the reason why they arrested him. If all they had was just his phone, had him there 23 times before, and there was no DNA, there was no video footage of this car, there was his phone being off during the time of the crimes would be an aspect to it. but I mean, if there was so much more less, or if that was all that they had, they wouldn't have arrested him, because they wouldn't have had enough to arrest him. So you got to make sure, we take all this with a grain of salt, knowing that there's a lot more evidence outside of just the cell data evidence. Now, I hope that whatever it is that, because I'm not strong enough to explain everything that Andrew Garrett explained, or even Cyree. I'm not a cell phone guy. I don't know those things, so I don't know if they've been addressed or not. But I just hope at the end of the day that they do get addressed and it's done correctly, because that's what's important. All right, I'm just going to answer a couple more of these super chats. We got that one. And your show is straight up the best on YouTube, man. Thanks for all your effort you put into this. Thank you so much, Justin Moto. I appreciate that. Do we have the data from both his phones, or if we have to be at work or personal cell at the same time? I think he had a Twilio account, which I think it had to do with his office number at work. And so what would happen is, I think instead of giving him like an office number, they give you it's like a Google Voice, where you can get a new phone number and people can call and text, and it'll go to your phone and stuff, but it's not your phone number. For businesses, some businesses do this as well. They'll put on a phone number, but they don't want people to have their personal cell phone, so they reroute it through like a Google Voice or Google Business number, things of that nature. I don't know if he had multiple phones. I don't. All righty, guys. Well, this is going to be it for me today. I'll be back on tomorrow night with retired former special agent, FBI agent Jennifer Coffendaff. We're going to talk about the the Dateline show with Bryan Kohberger. We're going to talk about all of the stuff that's been brought out, who could be in trouble. I know a lot of people were looking in my direction saying, Daniel, did you violate the gag order? And I said, I'm not part of the gag order. I don't recall DT show being listed on any non-dissemination order. If you see where there's a non-dissemination order that says DT show, please, by all means, show it to me, send it to me my way. And I guess I am pretty fortunate. We decided not to air out that video from 1112 King Road, the surveillance video, since that's been a topic of the non-dissemination order and the gag order, and that's been something that has been brought up by this recent court filing with this judge, who specifically mentioned that video of suspect vehicle 1. I will not be airing it. So take that for what it is. I know it's unfortunate. I really wanted to play it too, but I don't want to disrespect this judge, the court, or anything like that. So we'll leave it at that. Now, if it somehow gets out there and is aired out other means, then we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But for now, it won't. But I'll be back tomorrow night, guys. We'll talk to you later. Peace out.